The Taltos and the Ghosts of Budapest. Written and read by Tony Capobianco. Budapest was born when a Celtic settlement transformed into an ancient Roman town. Over 1.7 million people walk the streets of Budapest, and that doesn't include the ghosts of the deceased. Not even death could separate some spirits from the Gothic capital city of Hungary. Resting in the Carpathian Basin, Budapest has long been home to many myths and legends. Much as the Danube River flows into the city, so too do the tourists. With her smartphone attached to a gimbal, Nikki Applegate walked down the busy street. Host of a popular travel channel on WeTV, a social media behemoth, Nikki explored Budapest. Being her first time in the capital city, she was super enthused. Walking past the historic synagogue, basilica, and parliament buildings, she streamed it all. The massive buildings dwarfed her. Humbled by the Gothic beauty that surrounded her, Nikki soaked it up like a sponge. Walking along the sidewalk and admiring the high archways of the magnificent old buildings, she turned her head and did a double take. To her left, the side opposite of the direction she was recording with her phone, Nikki saw a transparent figure. A cold tingle radiated from the top of her spine. For 2 seconds, the figure of a man, quite transparent, stared into her green eyes. She pivoted her camera to capture the astonishing sight. It was too late. The ghostly specter had disappeared just as quickly as it had appeared. Disappointed but undeterred by the fact that she missed the opportunity to capture what she saw, Nikki recorded a segment for her travel vlog. Speaking into her microphone, Nikki said, "So, that just happened. You guys know that I don't believe in ghosts, but I think that I might have just seen one. I was walking and recording just as I always do. Then, I turned my head and saw the figure of a man, but the man wasn't fully there. I mean, I could see him, and he was looking at me, but he wasn't solid. Looking at him, I could both see him and see right through him. By the time that I pointed my camera on him, he was gone. Maybe the history of this place inspired my imagination to create what I saw. I can't be sure. Make of it what you will." What Nikki said was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. It's true that she didn't believe in spirits or hauntings, but she left out the important backstory. Ever since she was a little girl, she periodically saw the spirits of deceased loved ones. Up until she was 9 years old, she believed that she could communicate with her deceased grandfather. Her maternal grandfather had died of a heart attack before she was born. At first, her parents indulged her and chalked the ghostly visitations up to being the product of a child's imagination. They thought that their daughter's desire to meet and see the grandfather that she would never get to see in life had manifested a lifelike fantasy in her young mind. All in all, they thought it was sweet. Over time, however, Nikki's parents became more concerned. Nikki had started to tell her parents that she saw other long-deceased family members. The last straw was when Nikki spoke about seeing the souls of dead strangers. Afraid that Nikki was too old to have imaginary friends, her parents ordered her to put childish things away and to grow up. As the months passed, Nikki continued to talk with her unseen friends and family. Frustrated and frightened that something far more serious than an act of imagination was at work, Nikki's parents took her for a battery of medical exams. The young girl was taken to a neurologist as well as to a psychologist. To the relief of Nikki's parents, The doctors assured them that their daughter didn't seem to suffer from any neurological issues or from any detectable mental illness. Relieved that Nikki didn't suffer from schizophrenia, things began to become normal for the family. In the years that followed, Nikki stopped communicating with her invisible visitors. Whenever she did receive a ghostly visitor, she would ignore them. After a few years, she stopped seeing them altogether. Locked away, imprisoned behind a door within her mind, the ghostly memories of her childhood dissipated into a wispy, forgotten fog. Later that evening, as Nikki edited the day's footage for her upcoming video, she noted something unsettling. A tall, gaunt man wearing an old-fashioned hat appeared multiple times in multiple locations. With the number of locations that she traveled to that day, it couldn't have been a coincidence. The strange, elderly man must have been following her. While she had noted that the locals had been treating her in less than a hospitable manner, she didn't think that anyone was stalking her. Nikki had been annoyed that more than a few residents had stared at her and muttered things in a way that smacked of disapproval. She had chalked the unwelcomed behavior to the fact that she had dark blue highlights in her red hair, along with tattoos. Recognizing that she was in a very conservative country, she tried not to allow the cold looks to negatively impact her. Yet, when she repeatedly saw the same strange man in her footage, she could not help but be unnerved. How could she not be concerned or afraid? After all, she was traveling alone. Being an attractive 23-year-old woman in a foreign country meant that she had to be careful. While she understood that most people were good and kind, she was also aware that a minority of people were wicked and dangerous. Was the tall, elderly man a threat? Would she see him again? Those were the questions that swirled around her mind as she drifted off to sleep in her hotel room. The next day, Nikki left her hotel room at 10 in the morning and ventured off to explore the Grand Food Market. Ever since she had planned the trip, she was excited to try Hungarian food. Once again, her phone accompanied her as she recorded her food adventure. As she took a bite from a cucumber stuffed with pickled cabbage, she noted that the strange elderly man was there. Juice from the delicious pickled food ran down her chin as her eyes grew wide. A primal fear leapt up in her throat like a bullfrog. In a food market, surrounded by people, Nikki suddenly felt all alone. Surely, the man's appearance there was not a matter of chance. Her mind racing, she turned her phone towards her and said, "That tall, old man with the old-timey hat has been following me since yesterday. I'm going to head out of here and try to lose him. If something happens to me, remember his face." Trembling, Nikki slipped through the crowd and fled from the food market. After 15 minutes of brisk walking and turning down random streets, Nikki surveyed her surroundings. Her heart slowed down when she hadn't seen the scary old man. Feeling safe for the time being, and determined to finish filming all the destinations she had planned to cover for her show, Nikki carried on. The next famous destination on her list was the thermal pool. Many people believed that the warm, mineral-filled waters had healing properties. Arriving at the thermal pool, Nikki patrolled the area to ensure that the creepy old stranger hadn't followed her there. She had taken precautions and made sure that the old man hadn't followed her. To her relief, there was in fact no sign of him at the pool. Quickly slipping into her swimsuit, she entered the thermal pool. turned on her camera and started filming. The water was hot. It must have been over 90 degrees. Every muscle in her body relaxed as she bathed in the hot water. Nikki felt all of her stress melting away. Turning the camera towards herself, Nikki said, "I'm finally here at the thermal pool. I have to tell you that this place is world famous for good reason. Look how beautiful it is. The hot water feels even better than it looks. If you want to be perfectly relaxed, this is the place to come. It's like being wrapped in a hot, moist electric blanket. Imagine getting a bite to eat, having a drink, and then..." Nikki didn't finish her sentence on account of what she saw. A transparent figure stood at the side of the pool and stared at her. The figure seemed to be the same male figure that she had seen on the street the previous day. Despite being in a hot thermal pool, a series of freezing cold chills blasted down her spine. Moments ago, she had been sweating, and now she was shivering. Wanting to capture the ghost on video, she pointed her phone at the ghost. To her surprise, when she looked at the screen of her phone, the ghost wasn't there. Turning her gaze away from her phone and looking directly at the ghost with her own eyes, the phantom remained. Her heart rapidly thumped like a rabbit as she looked at the spirit. Nikki repeatedly looked into the screen of her phone as she recorded and looked at the ghost. Each and every time Nikki looked into her phone, the ghostly man was absent. And every time she looked away from her phone, there he was. Shocked and puzzled, Nikki was frozen in fear. A man's voice said to her, "He isn't going to show up on your film. He's a ghost, and ghosts won't be captured on film unless they want to be." Turning her head to see who spoke to her, Nikki gasped in terror and jumped backwards. It was the tall, thin, elderly man. There was no doubt in her mind. She knew that she was in grave danger. All of her life she wanted to visit Hungary. It was the homeland of her grandparents. Now, she feared that it would be the eternal resting place of her body. She would soon become one number amongst an ocean of missing persons. All of her hopes and dreams would die along with her. Never again would she see her parents. Never again would she fall in love. Her young life was about to come to a violent and abrupt end. All of those thoughts surged through her head in a tsunami of fear and despair. With all the color drained from her face, Nikki said, This is a public place filled with people. You can't kill me here, you creep." The tall, elderly man chuckled and replied, "Kill you? Child, I certainly don't want to kill you. I assure you that I mean you no harm. However, I do need to speak with you, and time is of the essence." Breathing rapidly, Nikki looked up at the stranger and said, "Who are you? What do you want? Why have you been following me?" With a soft smile, the tall man answered, "My name is Olmos. You are special and I need to speak with you. The sooner the better. It's urgent." Raising her eyebrows and tilting her head, Nikki said, "Special? Look, I'm like a quarter of your age. That's a shitty pickup line. I'm not going to hook up with you. That would be gross." Almost laughed and said, "Look around the pool. Notice how no one sees the spirit that's watching us. Only you and I can see him. If you're wondering why that is, I can tell you. If you want answers, get out of that thermal pool, put some clothes on, and meet me for a drink over at that bar. It's a public place. You'll be quite safe. The choice is yours." As soon as Olmos finished speaking, he began to walk slowly towards the bar. When he entered the bar, he pulled up a chair near the window and sat down. 10 minutes had passed when Nikki entered the bar and walked up to the table where Olmos sat. Nervously scraping the fingernail of her pointer finger against the fingernail of her thumb, Nikki looked at Olmos and said, "Okay, I'm here. Why could I see the transparent man? Why couldn't anyone else see him?" Taking a sip from his beer, Olmos answered, "Like I said, we are special. You are like me. I'm a Taltos." Nikki replied, "What's a Taltos?" Olmos gestured for Nikki to sit down. Once Nikki was seated, Olmos explained, "The Taltos are gifted individuals that are chosen by the gods. The gods endow the Taltos with special abilities. We can interpret dreams, heal people of sickness, travel up to the upper world and down to the lower world, and we can communicate with the spirits of the dead. With these powerful abilities, we can see hidden things. We can even peer into the future." Nikki raised her eyebrows and said, "Special powers given by gods? This sounds crazy. Maybe the more likely answer is that you secretly dosed me with some kind of a hallucinogen." As Nikki began to get out of her chair to leave, Olmos said, "You were born with natal teeth. You saw your grandfather when you were a child. Even though he passed before your birth, you developed a strong relationship with him. Your parents didn't believe you. At first, they thought that it was your imagination. Later, they feared that you might be mentally ill. Over time, your parents taught you to ignore your special gifts. Eventually, you lost them altogether." Nikki stopped in her tracks. It was as if someone had slapped her in the face. Mouth agape, Nikki said, "How can you know those things? I did have teeth when I was born. I did see and speak to my grandfather when I was a little kid." Olmos pointed at his right hand and said, "The Taltos are born with a sixth finger, extra bones, or teeth. I myself have a sixth finger. You had teeth at birth." Nikki sat down in the chair and said, "Okay, say you're not out of your mind. Say I believe you. What am I supposed to do? You said this was urgent." With his eyes becoming narrow, Olmos said, "The spirits have work for you to do. There's a reason that the spirit has been following you. It wants to speak with you, but you've suppressed your gift so much that the spirit struggled to appear to you. When we were at the thermal pool, I used my powers to help it manifest before you for a longer period of time. He wants your help." Leaning forward, Nikki said, "Why doesn't the ghost just ask you for help? Why go through all of this with me if it's so important?" Olmos answered, "Only the spirits and the gods know for sure. For reasons known only to them, they have chosen you. They want you to complete a particular task. I'm not sure what the task is exactly, but I sense that it's a matter of life and death. Whether or not you will help is entirely up to you. It's your choice, child." Tapping her fingers on the table as her heartbeat increased, Nikki said, "I want to help, but how can I? I haven't spoken with a spirit in over a decade." Olmos leaned across the table and tapped his right index finger against Nikki's forehead 3 times as he said some words in Hungarian. A warmth surged through Nikki's body. She felt like a powerful river of energy had rushed through her. All of the memories from her childhood were instantly restored. The locked door that had imprisoned her special gifts was unlocked. Her supernatural abilities were suddenly available to her for the first time in years. The experience of the unlocking of her abilities was so intensely overwhelming that Nikki had to head outside for fresh air. Almost left money on the table to pay for his drink and followed Nikki. Almost gently placed his hand on Nikki's back to reassure her as she frantically breathed. It was the afternoon. Rays of the sun shined a beautiful beam of light through the clouds and onto an ancient statue. After several intense minutes, Nikki began to calm down. A sacred peace had begun to replace the sterile chaos that had captured her. The transparent figure of a man walked towards Nikki and extended his hand. Nikki reached out as her hand met the ghostly hand. Although the spirit had no flesh, Nikki nevertheless felt something as their hands met. Then, a series of images suddenly played in her mind's eye. She saw flashes of hills and trees, an isolated building with a red roof, a little boy chained to a wall in a basement, and the face of a dragon-headed man. The series of vivid images were clear. A little boy was in grave danger. He was suffering greatly. The boy had the face of an innocent angel that looked like it was imprisoned in hell. Feelings of total fear, dread, and despair rose up within Nikki. Nikki gasped and said, "A sweet little boy is in trouble. He has been taken prisoner by a monster. Are monsters real too? The man in my vision had the head of a dragon. It was awful." Almost looked at Nikki and answered, "Monsters are real, but this particular monster happens to be human. Sometimes, humans are the worst kinds of monsters. The dragon head was a representation of how the boy sees his captor." Nikki's eyes grew wide as she said, "We have got to go to the police." Almost sympathetically shook his head and replied, "I'm afraid there is no time for that. The police won't believe you. If you don't act soon, the boy will not survive the night." Nikki's heart plunged into her stomach. She looked at Olmos and said, "But what could I possibly do? I'm not a fighter. I can't do this by myself." A wide smile crossed Olmos's face as he replied, "Child, you are never alone. The gods and the spirits are always with you. One doesn't need to use brute force in order to free someone. The spirits will guide you. Think of it as supernatural intelligence. Good, reliable intelligence is the key to winning a battle. Besides, I'll be accompanying you as well. Together, we shall free the poor unfortunate boy." The past 2 days had been difficult. Nikki had been anxious and afraid. She had seen a ghostly figure, been followed by a strange elderly man, and then she learned of a reality that she had never dreamt of. For years, Nikki had been an atheist. Then, all of a sudden, the existence of a spiritual realm had been made known to her. The truth of the new reality was undeniable. She would soon have to deconstruct all that she knew and craft a new worldview. A new understanding of reality, along with a different lens through which to view it, was necessary, but all of that would have to wait. Although Nikki's senses had been flooded with new information, she had to remain focused. The young Taltos was determined to finish the mission at hand. Finding the boy promptly was literally a matter of life and death. Her will was set. Nothing and no one would stop her from safeguarding the young, helpless life at stake. With the help of Olmos and the spirit of the deceased man, the crew left the center of Budapest and headed into the surrounding hills. It was dusk. The darkness of night was fast approaching. The sprawling hills would have been beautiful to behold under other circumstances. However, because time was not on their side, the sweeping landscape seemed like an adversary that had to be vanquished. The new friends hurried along. Olmos proved to possess a surprisingly robust stamina for his age. Muscles aching, sweaty, and growing fatigued, Nikki willed herself to overcome the restraints of her body. Not long after the sun had set, the building from Nikki's vision came into sight. Powerful feelings of fear and despair grew heavier inside of Nikki. Yet, at the same time, the negative feelings were restrained by a deep sense of hope and love. Once again, the ghost reached for Nikki's hand. Images immediately followed. Nikki saw exactly where the boy was being held captive. She had also seen where the murderous abductor was located. The malicious man was sitting in the living room, drinking wine. Staring at the house of horrors, Nikki said, "Olmos, you stay outside of the house and watch. If you hear me scream, save the boy. The monster is getting drunk in the living room. I'll stealthily enter the house through a window that he left open in the bathroom. From there, I'll let our spirit friends safely guide me into the basement." Firmly grasping Nikki's hands, Olmos said, "This is the path. May the gods always protect you and the spirits be with you." Rain began to fall as Nikki carefully moved toward the back of the house. Arriving at the bathroom window, Nikki pulled herself up and entered the house of horrors. Exactly as her vision had shown her, the window had been left open. Nikki hoped and believed that the rest of her visions would prove to be equally as accurate. Stepping gently out of the bathroom and into the hallway, the wooden floor creaked. Stopping and becoming motionless, Nikki hoped that the evil killer hadn't heard her. A few long, tense moments later, Nikki pressed on. Stepping as softly as she could, Nikki headed to the basement door. The door was locked and needed a key to be opened. A new vision came to Nikki. She saw that the key to the basement sat on a ring of keys on the coffee table in front of the sadistic psychopath. Just as Nikki wondered how she could reach the key, a loud knocking was heard upstairs on the second floor. The psychopath angrily grunted and called out. Heavy footsteps climbing the stairs were heard. Nikki didn't waste any time. She swiftly moved into the living room, snatched up the keys from the coffee table, and then returned to the basement. Putting the key into the lock, Nikki turned it. The lock clicked. The door was unlocked. With her heart pounding, Nikki hurried down the cellar steps. Keys in hand, Nikki raced to the boy in chains. Holding a finger to her lips, she gestured for the young boy to be quiet. In that moment, a vision revealed to her that the key to unlock the chains was a red key. Grabbing the red key, Nikki unlocked the chains. It was a success. The heavy chains dropped to the floor. Achieving that victory had been reassuring, but the mission had not been completed yet. Nikki and the young boy still had to escape the house and get far away from the deranged psychopath. Seeing a set of stairs that led to a door that opened up to the backyard, Nikki moved into the shadows. Cobwebs crept against her face. Chills ran down her spine. Opening the cellar door, Nikki's heart plunged into the depths of her stomach. The young boy shrieked in terror. The psychopath stood outside of the cellar door. Looming over their exit, the sadistic madman held an axe in his hands. A sinister grin crept across his face. He was going to dismember them into countless bloody bits and pieces. Rain falling on him, the psychopath stepped forward towards the steps. The sound of chanting was heard. It was almost. Nikki suddenly saw an angry mob of ghosts as they surrounded the serial killer. The deranged maniac swung his axe at the ghosts, but the axe harmlessly passed straight through them. Dropping his axe, the psychopath held his head in his hands. It seemed as though he was struggling to keep his head attached to his body. Almost continued to chant. The vile serial killer crashed down the steps. Whether he had stumbled or had been pushed down the stairs hadn't been clear. What happened next, though, was as clear as day. The angry spirits lifted the madman up and strapped him into the chains. The delightful sound of the chains clicking and locking into place brought smiles to the faces of Nikki and the boy. The captor had become the captive. The young boy had been set free. Along with the help of the spirits, Nikki and Olmos had successfully completed their mission. On that fateful day, life overcame death and hope overcame despair. Love and selflessness conquered twisted selfishness and cold nothingness. Thanks to the ghosts of Budapest, a young Taltos came of age. In learning who she really was, she could, for the first time, see a glimpse of what she might yet become. Thanks for stopping by the haunted Half Moon Inn. I hope that you have enjoyed your stay. Before you go, please put a wooden stake through the like button and leave a comment for the spirits to read. If you did enjoy your time with us, subscribe to this undead channel. Doing those little things really helps me to reach more souls. The world is sick and hurting. It needs more horror. Help me to heal the world through horror. Together, we can haunt this world one home at a time. And always remember, just because you don't see them doesn't mean that they aren't there.